Why 100 children walked into the mountains and never returned. The town with a secret it wouldn't speak of. There was a village, far from any map, hidden in the folds of misty mountains where the wind sang in a language only the trees understood, and the sun disappeared behind peaks too tall for time to touch. The village had no name, not because it had never been given one, but because the people who lived there stopped saying it centuries ago. They said names carried power, and some things, they whispered, were better left unnamed. It was a small place, 100 homes, 100 hearths, 100 quiet lives, the kind of place where no one ever left and no one ever arrived. Outsiders who passed through never stayed, birds never nested, and the dogs barked at shadows long after midnight. But inside those worn wooden houses, children played like children anywhere, running barefoot over mossy stones, chasing each other through fog-thick fields, laughing without fear. That was the strangest part. The laughter. Because the adults didn't laugh. They barely spoke. And they never, ever talked about the mountains. The mountains loomed like gods watching. Their jagged white crowns cut the sky, and even the clouds seemed to bow. At night, strange lights flickered on their slopes. Not fire, not stars. Something in between. Sometimes there were sounds too, low hums, deep rumbles, and flutes playing notes no instrument should know. But ask any adult in the village and they'd look away. Mutter something about weather, or wild goats, or trick ears. But not the children. The children weren't afraid. They told stories in whispers, of glowing stones, hidden doors, and music that came from underground. They drew strange maps in the dirt with sticks, pretending to be explorers. They played a game called Follow the Echo. And once a year, on the first day of spring, all the children, exactly 100 of them, would vanish into the forest trails and climb toward the mountains. No one ever stopped them. No one ever followed. It was tradition. It had been happening for longer than anyone remembered. And they always came back. Every spring evening at sunset, just before the last light kissed the valley. They'd return, silent, calm, changed. Not in ways you could see, but something in their eyes was different, like they'd seen something vast and forgotten it on purpose. This is where the story begins, not with their return, but the one year they didn't come back. That year was colder than most. The river froze in October. Wolves came down early from the ridges. The snow fell thick and silent like the sky had been holding its breath too long. But still, when spring cracked the ice and the frost began to bleed from the trees, the village prepared for the usual. The children gathered, 100 of them, laughing, barefoot, fearless. They wore garlands of blue pine and painted strange symbols on their faces. A game, they said, a custom, a secret. They lined up at the edge of the trees, facing the trail that wound like a scar into the heart of the mountain. And then they walked. No one stopped them. No one called their names, not their mothers, not their fathers. Just like every year, the grown-ups stood in silence, eyes low, hands clenched, prayers whispered through teeth they barely opened. That was the last time anyone saw the children. The sun fell, the stars rose, and the mountains stayed quiet. At first, no one panicked. It wasn't unusual for them to be late. Some years they returned only when the first owl hooted from the ridge. But midnight came, then morning, then another night, and still, nothing. On the third day, someone screamed. A mother. Her voice cracked the silence like glass. Then the silence returned. No one formed a search party. No one gathered torches. No one ran into the woods shouting names. Instead, one by one, the adults locked their doors, blew out their lamps, and waited. Some cried, some prayed, but most just stared at the mountains, like they had been expecting this for a very long time. And maybe they had. By the 7th day, the entire village was quiet. And it stayed that way, for weeks, for months, for years. No child ever returned. No sound came from the woods. The game was over. The laughter was gone. But something had been set loose. The wind changed. The trees leaned closer. The mountains waited. And the village, the one with no name, began to forget. Not just the event, but the children themselves. Names faded from memory. Photos were buried. Toys were burned. It was as if the children had never existed at all. Except one person remembered, an old man, the village's oldest. Half blind, but sharper than most. He didn't forget. He couldn't. Because he had once been one of the children who came back. And now, for the first time in 70 years, he was ready to break the silence. He would tell the truth, but only if someone was brave enough to ask. The old man lived at the edge of the village, where the forest pressed tight against the back of his home like a sleeping beast. His cottage was crooked, roof sagging under the weight of years, and his windows were always shuttered, not to keep the light out, but something else in. Most villagers avoided his path. They said he muttered strange things to birds and never blinked. Children used to throw pebbles at his door, but not anymore, not after the disappearance. Now no one dared go near him, except for one. A girl. She wasn't born in the village, not really. Her family had moved there a few years before everything changed, escaping the noise of cities, the smoke, the hurry of the world. Her name was Lyra, and unlike the others, she hadn't been allowed to join the spring walk. She had been too new, too young. So she stayed behind that day and watched as every child she had ever played with, laughed with, vanished into the woods, including her older brother. He never came back. Lyra stopped talking for weeks, but when she found her voice again, it wasn't broken. It was sharp. She began to ask questions. She scribbled maps, drew the mountains from memory. She pressed her ears to the earth to listen. And when she couldn't find answers in the village, she turned to the only person who might remember something no one else dared to. The old man. She knocked on his door one gray morning, heart pounding. No one answered. She waited, knocked again. Nothing. Then she whispered through the wood, "I want to know where they went." The door creaked open, not fully, just enough for one pale eye to peer out. Then a voice dry as leaves. "You shouldn't." But she didn't leave. And so, he let her in. The air inside his cottage was thick, not with dust, but memory. Shelves lined with jars of moss and ash, strings of bones and carved stones hung from the ceiling. In the corner, a fire crackled, though there was no wood in it. And in the center, the old man sat in a chair that looked like it had grown from the ground itself. He studied her for a long time. Then he spoke. "I remember the last time I walked into the mountain. I was 12. Like your brother." Lyra didn't breathe. "There were always 100 of us. Never more, never less. I don't know how the number stayed exact, but it did, as if the mountain itself kept count." He paused, hands shaking as he reached for something beside his chair. A bundle wrapped in old cloth. He unrolled it. Inside was a mask, carved from black wood, painted with symbols that looked like they'd been written in fire. "We wore these," he whispered. "They told us it was a game. But it wasn't." He leaned closer. "The mountain calls. That's the truth. You don't walk into it. You're drawn, pulled, like a thread being tugged." Lyra asked, "What's in there?" The old man's eyes dimmed. "A door." "To where?" "I don't know. None of us knew. We'd walk, laughing, playing. Then the air would change. The sky would dim, even if it was morning. And suddenly, we were somewhere else. A place under the mountain, where no light reached but everything glowed." Lyra shivered. "And you came back?" The old man nodded slowly. But not everyone did. Some of us disappeared. In silence. No screams. Just gone. Like the mountain chose. "Why you?" she asked. "Why did it let you leave?" He hesitated. "Because I ran. I looked into something I shouldn't have, and I ran." "What did you see?" He said nothing, but his hands gripped the arms of the chair so tight, his knuckles turned white. Then he whispered, "They weren't alone in there." Lyra's heart pounded. "Who?" The fire crackled louder. The old man stood, took the mask, and held it out to her. "If you really want to know, take this. But understand, the mountain gives no second chances. If you go, you may not come back. Like the others." Lyra stared at the mask. She thought of her brother's smile, of his hand waving goodbye as he vanished into the trees. And she took it. The old man's face broke, not into a smile, but something like sorrow. Then he said the words no one had spoken aloud in decades. "Follow the echo." And the moment she stepped out of his door, the wind changed. It came down from the peaks like a sigh, cold and sharp, as if the mountain had been waiting. Lyra didn't tell anyone she was going, not because she was afraid they'd stop her. They wouldn't. No one in the village dared go near the trail anymore. But because deep down, she knew the mountain was listening, watching, and it didn't like noise. She packed nothing, just the mask, a sliver of dried apple from her brother's old satchel, and a notebook she had stitched together herself, filled with drawings and half-finished maps. Before dawn, she slipped out through the back window of her cottage. The village still slept, or pretended to. Even the birds were silent. The trailhead was just beyond the northern field, hidden by a curtain of silver pines that whispered like they remembered too much. She stood before it now, the same place where 100 children had vanished. The same place her brother had smiled before turning his back for the last time. She tied the mask to her face. It smelled of smoke and something older. Something not quite dead. Then, without a word, she stepped into the woods. The forest swallowed her in a single breath. The light shifted. Not darker exactly, but dimmer. Like the sun had forgotten how to reach this part of the world. Trees leaned in close. Roots curled like claws across the path. The ground was soft. Too soft. As if it remembered footsteps and didn't like them being repeated. She walked. At first, the trail seemed normal, familiar. But soon, strange things began to appear, symbols etched into bark, the same ones from the mask, stones stacked in impossible balance, a doll's shoe, half buried in moss. She kept moving, following the sound. There was always a sound now, not music, not wind, but something humming just below hearing, like the earth itself was singing a note meant only for her. Then she heard the voice. It wasn't loud, it didn't shout. It didn't echo, but it was there. "Lyra!" Her brother's voice. She froze. "Lyra, come see." She turned. No one. The trees stood still. The mask felt heavier now, like it wasn't just resting on her face but sinking into her skin. She touched it, and it pulsed. Warm. Alive. She kept walking. The forest bent, time twisted. She couldn't tell how long she had been walking. Minutes, hours, maybe days. Hunger came and went like a thought. Thirst disappeared. Her notebook pages fluttered on their own, flipping to drawings she didn't remember making. One showed a black door, one showed a child with no face, one showed the mountain, cracked open like a skull. Then finally the path ended, not with a clearing, but a wall, the mountain, a sheer face of stone, too smooth to be natural, covered in carvings, older than language. In its center, a door, just like her drawing. It wasn't made of wood or iron, it was made of darkness, a doorway carved not into the mountain, but out of it, as if the stone had simply parted to let something in. or out. She stepped closer. The mask pulsed again, and then the door opened. No sound, no creak, just a ripple of air, like breath drawn in. Inside there was no light, but she could see. Everything glowed with that same unreal shimmer the old man had described. Walls of stone that moved like water, symbols that rearranged themselves when she blinked. She stepped inside. The door closed behind her, but she didn't turn. She moved forward. The tunnel wound downward, deeper. The humming grew louder, and then she saw them, children, 100 of them. Frozen in place, eyes closed, standing in a circle. Not dead, not alive, asleep. Each one held something in their hands, feathers, bones, stones, memories. And in the center of the circle, hovering just above the ground, was a heart. Not a human one, bigger, older, beating slow. With every pulse, the stone floor breathed. Lyra stepped forward and the children opened their eyes. All at once, their mouths didn't move, but she heard them. "We are the mountain." Her legs nearly gave out. The voice in her mind continued, "We are the chosen, the dreamers, the ones who walked into the echo and were never meant to leave." She saw her brother among them, eyes full of stars, face calm. "Why?" she whispered aloud. "Why are you here?" The answer came, soft as snowfall. "To keep it sleeping." "What is it?" she asked. They all looked up. The ceiling above them cracked, not with damage, but light. And for a moment, Lyra saw it. Something vast, coiled, watching, not with eyes, but with memory. Something that had been buried before stories began, sealed beneath the mountain. And only the laughter of children, their wonder, their dreams, could keep it from waking. The echo was not just a call. It was a warning. Lyra's knees hit the ground. Her brother stepped forward, touched her hand. "It needs another dreamer," he said softly, "or it wakes." She looked around, at the other children, at the heart, at the thing above. Then she looked back at the door, still open, still waiting. Her choice, stay and become one of the dreamers, or leave and let the mountain wake. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the dreamers gathered around her. They weren't frightening. They weren't cold. If anything, they looked more peaceful than anything she had ever seen. Their faces didn't move, but their voices were everywhere. In the stone, in the air, in her chest. Their words weren't commands. They were invitations, gentle, like a lullaby sung by something too old to be cruel. The chamber pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't just from the glowing heart floating in the center. It was the rhythm of something asleep, something deeper. Lyra clutched her brother's hand, and it felt real, warm, alive. But wrong, too. Like she wasn't supposed to be able to hold him anymore. Like holding on too long would tear something loose. He looked at her with the same eyes she remembered from their childhood. But beneath them was something vast. Like he remembered everything. Like he had forgotten more than she'd ever learn. "You can stay," his voice whispered inside her. "We can keep it dreaming. With you, the balance will hold." "And if I go?" she asked. "The dreaming stops, slowly. It will wake." "What is it?" There was silence. Then one voice answered. Not her brother, not the others. The mountain. "You know what it is," it said. "You've felt it your whole life." And she had. The cold wind that pressed against the back of her neck when she was alone. The sense of being watched when nothing was there. The dreams of falling into an endless dark that whispered her name. It had always been there, waiting. It wasn't evil. That would be too simple. It was hunger, curiosity, chaos without shape, the first thing, the last thing, and the dreamers, the 100 children, were the song that kept it quiet. She looked down at her notebook. Somehow it was still with her. The pages fluttered on their own, blank. Then one word appeared, scrawled in ink that looked like bone dust. "Run!" She looked up. Her brother's eyes flickered. "You don't have to," he said. But something cracked above them, not the ceiling, the sky. Far above the mountain in the real world, clouds began to spiral. Birds scattered. The earth took one long, groaning breath. And the forest, the one that had stood silent for decades, began to scream. The door behind her flickered, still open, still possible. Lyra's legs moved before her mind caught up. She ran. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't explain. Because deep down, she knew. They weren't asking her to stay out of love. They needed her. Her mind, her dreams, her life. One more voice in the choir of sleep. But she wasn't ready to sleep. The mountain did not like her choice. The path back twisted, shifted. Roots rose like hands. Stones rolled into her way. The mountain groaned and the walls pulsed with red light now, not soft and humming, but angry and awake. The children's faces faded into the stone, mouths open, eyes wide. They were no longer dreamers. They were warnings. The heart in the chamber shattered, and something began to rise. Lyra reached the doorway just as it began to close, not like a door slamming, but like an eye narrowing. She dove, rolled, hit the ground outside just as the stone sealed shut behind her with a sound that wasn't a sound at all. A silence so complete, it felt like her ears were bleeding. She lay in the grass. The sky above was spinning. The forest shook. Trees leaned away from the mountain. And then it stopped. Everything stilled. Not because the danger was gone, but because it was watching. Lyra sat up. Her mask was gone. Her notebook was blank. Her brother's voice was gone. And yet, the mountain stayed silent. Had she escaped? Or had she doomed them all? She walked back to the village. The road was longer now, the sky darker. She didn't know how much time had passed. Days? Weeks? When she arrived, the village was different. Empty. The houses were there, the paths, the fields, but no people, no sounds, no smoke. It was as if the village had been paused or erased. Except one person remained. The old man. He stood at the center of the square, staring at the mountains, his eyes wet, his hands trembling. "You opened it," he said. Lyra didn't answer. "I heard it. In my sleep. The singing stopped." She swallowed. "What happens now?" The old man looked at her, and for the first time he looked young, not in his face, but in his fear. "I don't know." She turned toward the mountain. The sky above it shimmered. No lightning, no storm, just a shimmer like heat above a flame. The dreaming had ended. And now, something was listening. Lyra didn't sleep the night she returned. Not that night. Not any night after. The village remained hollow like a stage left behind after the play had ended. Wind moved through the empty windows. Crows circled but never landed. The river ran backwards for one day, and the mountain glowed at night, a dull, breathing pulse that lit the sky in colors she didn't have names for. The dreamers were gone. The silence was louder than ever. She stayed in her old cottage, alone. The fire refused to burn. Her mother's bed remained made, cold. Her brother's drawings on the wall had faded, but one remained, a crude sketch of the mountain with a single word beneath it. Wait. Every morning, she stood at the edge of the village, staring at the peaks. And every night, she felt it. That slow rhythm, that distant hum, the echo that had always been there. Except now it wasn't muffled. It wasn't hidden behind laughter or song. It was awake. And it was curious. The old man wouldn't leave his house. He covered his mirrors, spoke in riddles. When Lyra asked him what he had seen all those years ago, what had made him run, he only said one thing. I didn't run from what I saw. I ran from the part of me that wanted to stay. Lyra understood that now. There was something beautiful in that place under the mountain, something eternal. The dreamers weren't prisoners, not exactly. They were pieces, parts of something larger, something ancient. They were keeping it dreaming, yes, but they were also learning from it, feeding it stories, teaching it what it meant to be human. And now it was awake enough to remember, to wonder, to hunger, but not in the way a monster hungers, in the way a child does, curious, reaching, eager to understand by touching everything at once. And that was far more dangerous. One morning, the birds stopped singing again, not just in the village, everywhere, across valleys, across cities, across oceans. Satellites flickered. Clocks stalled for a fraction of a second. In distant places, children began to draw symbols in chalk that no one had taught them. They spoke of dreams that smelled like earth and ash. Some began walking into forests, into caves, into old roads long buried. The mountain was not alone anymore. Its dream had spread. It had tasted the minds of 100 children for centuries. Now it wanted more. Lyra tried to warn people. She left the village, finally, found roads, found cities, found cameras, microphones, stages. She told her story, not like a survivor, like a witness. But the world laughed. Or worse, they listened too closely. They called her visionary, prophet, mythmaker. And slowly, the echo found its way into them. Not all at once, but in dreams, in songs stuck in your head that you can't remember hearing, in the way your child whispers a name in their sleep you never taught them, in the stories that keep repeating across generations. It's there now. Not in the mountain, but in us. Because once a dream is heard, it doesn't go away. And if enough people believe it, if enough people remember, then it no longer needs the mountain. It can live in your walls, in your lullabies, in your silence. Lyra disappeared eventually, just like the children, just like the village. Only one thing was found: her notebook, left on a bench at the edge of a playground. Inside, a new drawing, a circle of children holding hands, eyes closed, faces calm. And at the center, a heart, still beating, still dreaming. But for how long? If you heard something tonight, a hum, a whisper, a memory that doesn't belong to you, don't be afraid. Just don't forget. Because the moment we stop dreaming, it wakes. Subscribe to Uncle Luke Tells for more stories you've never heard but might never forget.